Welcome back for Week 5's wide receiver rankings and tiers video. Wide receivers are going down like flies, and bye weeks are taking away a few of the other guys that we wanted to start. But I'm here to help you make all of the right decisions in Week 5. So if you haven't already, make sure you do subscribe to the channel. We're coming up with videos each and every single day, and let's go ahead and jump into the S tier wide receivers for Week 5. All of these guys are playing regardless of matchup, but in case you missed it, the running back rankings and tiers video, one, go ahead, hop over on the YouTube, check it out. If you want to see all of the running back rankings for Week 5, I've got you there. And then two, the green indicator around the players like Garrett Wilson, Nico Collins indicates that they have a top 6 matchup for the position. And the red indicates they have a bad matchup or a bottom 6 matchup for the position, like Puka Nacua and Jackson Smith-Njigba. Basically, green is good, red is bad. It doesn't mean you're benching Puka Nacua or JSN. It just means it's going to help you out when you get to the later tiers and you're trying to make those start-sit decisions. So going on to A tier, again, a lot of guys that you are 100% basically starting in almost every single league. No one here you should be benching. And you'll see Ja'Marr Chase is up there. Do not bench him. I get countless questions on my lives, which I'm live each and every single day. Do I start Ja'Marr Chase or do I start Khalil Shakir? Do I start Ja'Marr Chase or Stephon Diggs? If you want to do that, by all means, be my guest. But Chase can take over a game, have 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. For the players in lower tiers that you would possibly be starting over Ja'Marr Chase, that would probably be a career game for them. And furthermore, he had 70% of a game with Browning where he went 14 for 165 and 1. That's not bad. The other 2 games, one was against the Vikings, who are number 1 against wide receivers, and the other game, he was blanketed by Patrick Surtain. I'm not saying you buy him, I'm not saying you sell him, but you don't abandon ship. You start him each and every single week. It's been 2 brutal matchups. And then going on to B tier, I have Deebo Samuel versus the Chargers. The Chargers are 4th best against wide receivers, but as we know, Deebo, he's not like any other wide receiver. He's not practicing as of Wednesday, but that could be a veteran day of rest. Back and forth between Terry McLaurin, will play, won't play, but Jaden Daniels should be back. He's trending in the right direction, practicing in full. That gives me a lot more confidence in Deebo Samuel, who we've already seen be good with Marcus Mariota. On to the next wide receiver, we have Michael Pittman Jr. versus the Raiders. This is the 3rd easiest matchup for wide receivers. As you can see, he has the green around him. Deebo, who had a bad matchup, has the red around him. Just to reiterate, Michael Pittman surprisingly has 3 of Daniel Jones' 4 passing touchdowns. He has a super solid 24% target share. Keep playing him. He's the wide receiver 14. And then going on to Teteroa McMillan, the rookie wide receiver, plays the Dolphins. He has the 13th most targets in the league. That's more than Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, we do need to find the end zone. Not a bad matchup for the Panthers. Next up, we have Marvin Harrison Jr. versus the Titans. Many people gave up on Marv, and it was looking pretty bad last week, Thursday Night Football versus the Seahawks. The last 3 Marvin Harrison Jr. matchups have been against the top 5 hardest defenses for wide receivers. However, it does get better this week, and it does get better next week. He's got back-to-back games versus top 6 easiest matchups. Go ahead, start him up. Should be a lot more confident with Marvin Harrison Jr. this week. And then here comes a name that I told a lot of people to bench because the Chiefs were telling us they're not really going to use him. Xavier Worthy versus the Jags. Again, Andy Reid and the Chiefs were saying he's going to be very limited. We're going to work him in slowly, and then they use him to possibly the fullest extent. He led the team in targets. He was tied for 1st in receptions. He also ran the 3rd most routes for the Chiefs, and that was in a blowout victory versus the Ravens. I couldn't imagine how much more they would have used him had the matchup been close. Either way, I won't make that mistake again. We're starting up Worthy this week. And then we're going on to Jacoby Myers versus the Colts. He's never a pretty start, but the targets are there, and as we know, targets are earned. He's 14th in targets among all wide receivers. If you want a safer wide receiver who's getting the volume and has a nice matchup, which is the Colts, who are 4th easiest against wide receivers, then look no further than Jacoby Myers. Staying on the subject of easy matchups and tons of volume, Chris Olave plays the Giants. Olave is 2nd in targets in the NFL, and now he gets the 2nd easiest matchup for wide receivers. I mentioned not benching Ja'Marr Chase for random bench dudes or people off the waiver wire, super weak flex players, but this is about where I draw the line. You could include the next guy if his quarterback plays, but if you wanted to start anyone on your screen right now over Chase, I'd be totally cool with that decision. And that next guy you ask, that's Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers versus the Texans. He'd be higher, but it is looking like Lamar is not going to suit up in this one. He is not practicing as of Wednesday. If Lamar does suit up, I'm fine with Flowers being probably all the way to the front of this tier. But if not, this is about where he's going to sit for me. He's getting a ton of targets. It's a low passing volume offense. Super Rush changed that. I'm not totally sold, but hopefully Lamar suits up so our Zay Flowers shares skyrocket. And then on to C tier, I do have Keenan Allen versus the Commanders. I believe it was week 3 when I mentioned that only 2 of the 3 Chargers wide receivers on a given week are going to be relevant. And it was week 2 when I mentioned that if Justin Herbert has a down game, it's probably only going to be 1 wide receiver that's relevant on the week. And week 4, that's exactly what we saw. It was a Quentin Johnston week. All of them, quite frankly, have been Quentin Johnston week. But you keep playing Keenan Allen. He's tied 6th among wide receivers for end zone targets. And I'm fine with him as a perfectly good wide receiver 2. Hopefully, in this matchup, Jaden Daniels does play. Again, he's on track for it, to keep the game pretty close against the 3-1 Chargers. And everybody probably had this guy on their bench, and his value just went so much higher. Jalen Waddle versus the Panthers. It's a bad matchup on the road for Waddle in his first game without Tyreek Hill. I'm trying to see what his workload looks like. I understand with bye weeks and injuries happening, people are probably going to have to play him. But I'm expecting some change in the workload. It's not going to all go just straight to Waddle. You're going to see Achane with more targets. You're going to see Darren Waller get worked more into the offense, just as we did last week. And then Malik Washington, who I mentioned on the waiver wire episode, is a sneaky player who just needed to get some opportunity. Now, it was just last season that we saw Jonnu Smith have 88 receptions on 111 targets in this Miami Dolphins offense. Can Darren Waller do that after taking a year off of football and just getting back into it at his age? Possibly. Time will tell, but for right now, Jalen Waddle is a pretty weak wide receiver 2 for your team, the wide receiver 1 for the Dolphins. And then this next guy, Brian Thomas Jr., he plays the Kansas City Chiefs. He's top 14 in targets among all wide receivers, so that's good. But based off of his usage, he should be at about 13.5 fantasy points, which would be a top 24 number. So we should see that regress positively, and call me insane, but I'm still throwing him into my lineups. Again, nothing more than a super strong upside flex. Please, Brian Thomas, I am speaking for everyone in the fantasy community. Please have a good week for us. Jordan Addison versus the Browns. First game back, 96% of the snaps, 4 catches for 114 yards, and I'm pretty sure he fell just shy of the goal line on his huge reception. He's going to move a lot in people's rankings. You're going to see him ranked all over the place, and in my lives, I'm sure I'm going to get even more questions about Jordan Addison. My biggest thing is I don't believe that Carson Wentz is going to go throw for 350 yards again, so he's going to be a little lower for me. But I am pretty excited to throw him into my lineups because he can always have a big play, as we saw in his first week back. And then this next guy, Big Play AJ, well, it's been awful, okay? He plays the Broncos here in week 5. Here's been the story with AJ Brown. First 2 weeks, he's awful. Then some of us probably had the guts to bench him, and he blows up. So we go back to the well, we get hurt again. Now he plays Denver, and he's going to be absolutely blanketed by Pat Surtain. He's not a full bench, but there are certainly guys that you've drafted later that you can play ahead of him. Just know anybody else you see on this tier list from here on out won't have nearly as much upside as AJ Brown does on a weekly basis. And that does include Mr. Ladd McConkey versus Washington. It was a bad game for Justin Herbert, as I mentioned last week. It was a bad month of September for Ladd. Does it get better? I'm not sold. I know he's talented, but there are just more talented players around him at the moment. So unless there's some weird injury that happens to a Chargers wide receiver, Ladd is probably a bench. And then I feel like I say each and every single week with this guy, Jameson Williams versus the Bengals. Vegas has the Lions implied team total at 30 points. Now, if there was ever a defense and a week for JMO to hit that big play, probably in week 5. But that's exactly how you should be looking at him. Somebody who can lose you the week, somebody who can win you the week. So if you're cool with that, start him up. And then I have Stephon Diggs versus Buffalo, a revenge game. He blew up a lot of people's benches because nobody was starting him. Multiple, so games in a row. I don't expect him to have many 100-yard games left in the tank, but again, it's a revenge game. Last season when he was with the Texans versus the Bills, he went 6 for 82. Now that's probably more than you'll get for Stephon Diggs, but it is the highest over-under of the week, so I do want players in this game. Speaking of players in this game, kicking off D tier is Khalil Shakir versus New England. Again, highest over-under of the week. He's found the end zone the last 2 weeks. Banking on touchdowns from Khalil Shakir isn't something I would be doing. He's never been a big touchdown guy. He has a career high of 4. So expect somewhere around 5 for 50, and if he gets in the end zone, you're lucky and you're happy. Coming off of injury, Chris Godwin at the Seahawks. 10 targets in his first game back. That's pretty nice. but his production just wasn't there. Probably knocking off a little bit of rust. Plus, the matchup wasn't ideal. The Seahawks are third against wide receivers, and just looking ahead, the 49ers, who he has in week 6, are top 5 against wide receivers. And then I have a Scary Terry coming in the D tier, plays the Chargers. He missed practice on Wednesday, so his availability is uncertain, but if he does play, this is about where I would have him. Combine the injury with a bad matchup, I'm okay looking elsewhere than Scary Terry. And then we have T. Higgins versus Detroit. Nearly unstartable, but if you want a big man who we know is talented and is healthy, this is where you could go. But just the offense is obviously not clicking right. And then next, I have Wan'Dale Robinson versus the Saints. There's a lot of red flags with this one. It's a low passing volume offense, plus it is a rookie quarterback. Wan'Dale should still be targeted a ton with those low value dink and dunk passes as he has historically in his career. But that's not very valuable outside of PPR leagues. And again, as I said, I want players that are in this over-under. Keon Coleman kind of fits the bill, but kind of doesn't. Plays New England, 3 receptions in each of his last 3 games, but no more than 4 targets in any of them either. The biggest problem is teams have not been able to keep it competitive, so they don't have to throw the ball. And the Bills are willing to just run the ball over and over and over again. So in this one, you're banking for the Patriots to keep it close. Vegas has the Bills at 8.5-point favorites, so it's possible, not probable. And then next, I have Devonta Smith versus the Broncos. There's an argument to be made for Devonta Smith over A.J. Brown this week. I'm not going to make that argument, but the Pat Surtain thing has me a little afraid. But even so, do we really want to be starting any of the pass catchers for the Eagles when they are passing it only 25 times a game? That is the lowest rate in the entire NFL. The answer to that is no. And then last but not least, on the D tier, I have Trey Tucker versus the Colts. The only reason he isn't in E tier is because he's got a good matchup. He should be benched mainly everywhere, but I do like him over all the other options we're about to talk about in E and F tier. And before we get to E and F tier, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. I'm going live each and every single day, throwing up these ranking videos and waiver wire videos for you to help you win your league. And then in E tier, I just kind of tiered all these guys together. You can pick your poison with these guys, and they might genuinely be poison. If you start any of these guys, they might kill your entire fantasy week. I like a lot of them, but they should be just more stashes on a lot of benches unless you're in super deep leagues. And then there was the dreaded F tier wide receivers. You would basically have to hold me underwater for 10 minutes straight and take my phone away from me and adjust my lineup. That is the only way they are making it into any of my fantasy. And again, if you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, I am throwing up my quarterback, tight end, and defense rankings video tomorrow and Thursday before Thursday Night Football. So I will see you then.